First of all, it's really great that you're here. I know there's a lot of choices of conference and seminars everywhere, so it's really great that you're here. What I'm going to talk about is, I'm going to condense it a bit. I initially thought I had 30 minutes, so I'll do it in 20 so that we have a bit more of Q&A. What I will mainly talk about is scaling, and especially how Europe and European policy and European funds can help you scale your company, especially in an age of AI. So those are the main points that I will talk about with some examples of what's coming and where to find funding to grow your companies next. So who am I? For those who don't know me, for those who know me, it's also me. I basically do three things. First of all, with Genisys, which is a company via which I'm helping especially scale-ups to innovate and scale in Europe. Secondly, we do BeCentral. BeCentral is a co-working hub in the center of Brussels. So if you're ever in the central station, all the offices in the central station of Brussels are now a tech hub where more and more it's open for any company and any startup to be at. And then thirdly, I'm quite active at the European Commission. So the European Commission created a new instrument called the European Innovation Council, which is basically an investment fund of now 10 billion, but it will drastically increase to invest in tech ventures. I'll talk a bit about that later, and as a background, I used to be CEO of Skynet and some other stuff. And the picture you always see behind me is because I like to explain that Skynet is a Belgian internet company that's now part of Proximus, was created nearly 25 years ago, and it was based on the movie The Terminator, where Arnold Schwarzenegger had to defend the world against the evil AI virus named Skynet. So finally, 25 years later, the AI virus, or the AI has arrived. That's also why my new company is called Genisys, because that's the successor of Skynet in Terminator 3. So I think one element is that technology moves in waves. We have to look at that. Sometimes there's not a lot happening, and sometimes you have like days where complete decades happen. So many things happen. If you now look at what's happening in AI, you nearly have to study every day an hour to know all the things that are happening, and that's not going to change. We used to have these evolutions from industrial evolution to digital networks, but now we have a couple of them at the same time. We have artificial intelligence, and we have quantum computing, and we have space tech, and we have new forms of energy, and we have computational biology, and we have robotics, and they're all arriving at the same time. And I think the most drastic of all of them is AI. And there's a book that was written a couple of years ago by Henry Kissinger, who passed away last year, American Secretary of State, together with Eric Schmidt, who was the CEO of Google for more than 10 years, and somebody with a complex name who was the dean of MIT. And they said you have to look at AI from and the business perspective, and the policy or politics perspective, and the academic. You cannot just look at it from one side, because then you have an unbalance, which is basically happening a bit at this moment in the world, but I'll come to that in a moment. Because if you look what's happening now, we had, and I projected these three American entrepreneurs because their image has changed a lot. The left one is Mark Andreessen. He's one of the most famous venture capitalists. On the right side you have David Sachs, who's one of the most known crypto investors, but he's now a bit the US leader for everything that's AI and crypto. And in the middle, probably the most controversial is Elon Musk. If 3 or 4 years ago I would have asked here, who is one of our most admired entrepreneurs, half of us would have said Elon Musk. If now you would ask, well, who is the one that we trust in the age of AI with our data, and is he the trustworthy innovator? I think there's a lot less hands that go up now. And so you see that in this evolution where tech has such an impact, individual leadership has a very drastic element. And so you see that also that throughout the world that this techno-optimism that we nearly had of the US, where Europe basically saw the US and Silicon Valley companies as their ally, well, now there's a bit of cynicism and a bit of pessimism, and that's now resulting into something that every region in the world is now creating its own tech stack and its own AI intelligence. So you'll have a European one, you'll have a Chinese one, you have an Indian one, you have a US one. Everybody will have their own kind of strategic autonomy or sovereignty. What does this mean for Europe? Does Europe have any chance? I see some people saying so, and I see some people already nodding no. I think Europe has a chance if we address a couple of the issues that we have. And if you look with a bit of background into the things that go less well, the number one issue that we have compared to the US and also compared to other regions now is that 95% of patents, means research from university, is unused. That's actually quite crazy. That only means that 5% of the innovation that is done, of all the research that's done, results in an actual company. And that's a lot lower. So if you look at the research and at the talent, Europe and Asia and China are pretty similar. If you then look at startups that are created out of that research, then Europe immediately loses nearly 30% in ratio. So that's a big issue. We have to make sure that universities are not fundamental research or that they don't create just patents or publications. We have to make sure that they result in companies, in startups, and that kind of mentality is increased. A second big issue that we have is that we don't have any big tech companies. So this image is always a bit double. On the one side you see the US with all the companies that are less than 50 years old and that have a market capitalization of more than 10 billion. Microsoft, Nvidia, Amazon, Apple, Meta, Google, Tesla, they're all there. On the right and on the other side you see the European one, and it's not even the big one. You know, I extrapolated it, it's a small one which indicates all European new companies that have been created in the last 50 years with that valuation, which is nearly nothing. And so that means that, especially in an age of AI, there is a huge disadvantage. Because what's happening in AI is that these large corporations are the main investors. It's Microsoft that invests in OpenAI, and it's Amazon that invests in Anthropic. And so these large companies, they invest, then they have all the data to train their models, Twitter with Grok and all the others that I mentioned. And then if that's not already enough, they also have all the distribution power, right? If there's an OpenAI feature integrated in Word, well, the next day there's 25 million users. And so we don't have tech giants in Europe, and even Asia is a bit complicated on that, but at least they have they're growing in that number now. And then thirdly, I think it also has to do with the mentality of corporates. They asked Jeff Bezos at a conference, what do you do? What do you do besides creating a large company? And he said 95% of my time is spent on figuring out what Amazon looks like in the next couple of years. 95% of his time is spent on AI. And I thought, wow, I would wonder if founders or European CEOs were asked that question, if it would be 95% focus on the future and 5% on the operations of a company. And so that mentality of being so future oriented is also something that needs to change. And so if you look at ecosystems, I'm not going to go in detail on all of them, but ecosystems or regions, their competitiveness is always measured in 5 elements. One is there an entrepreneurial mindset, and are there sufficient startups? Secondly, do you have the investors? Is there sufficient risk capital? Thirdly, do you have strong research, and does that research result into real innovation? Fourth, does policy and politics help in enabling that? And fifth, are the corporates ready to support all that? And I'm going to just go into 2 of them, a bit of lack of time. One of them is policy. And so the day before yesterday, you had the 1-year report of Draghi, which at a certain moment basically said, well, Europe has to simplify and lose a lot of the regulation. And secondly, Europe needs to invest, he said 800 billion, a certain amount, to basically fight these huge tech companies that we don't have. Out of that, there is and I invite you all to look at that. There's a new European startup and scale-up strategy that has now been announced, which is absolutely the most ambitious that was ever there. Europe now even has a European Commissioner of Startups. That's really great. We always had energy and defense, but now we have a European commissioner with a focus on startups. And so that's a unique element. And in that you'll see now they created 28 initiatives that will help any company, if you're European or if you want to do business in Europe, to grow from here. And there's a couple of elements which are really going to change a lot. One of them, for example, is called the 28 regime, which basically means that at this moment, if you would start your company from Belgium or Germany or Italy, and then you want to expand into other companies, well, each time you have to create a subsidiary, because otherwise from a Belgian company you cannot hire somebody in France, so you have to create a France entity. 28 regime means that you can set up a company and it's immediately European. So it's a bit comparable to what the US did with their Delaware structure. This is kind of the adaptation of it, and that will completely change how you can sell, hire, do your taxes, do your stock options, all these things that make that our companies can grow. I think I'm a bit concerned party in it, but I think one of the things that works fairly well is the EIC, that's the European Innovation Council, so that's a fund and a structure that helps to support deep tech. So that deep tech is basically research-based technology. So we had a budget of 10.4 billion, and half of that is invested directly into startups. So it's not via companies or grants or whatever, it's direct investment into companies. And the great thing is, I think it works really well. Draghi said it worked fairly well, and in the new proposal from next year on, they suggested that this budget increase from 10 to 35 billion. So that means that we can do all these things times 3.5. And I think those kind of investments are needed for European or companies that come in Europe to scale much faster. And you'll hear, hope, much about that later. And one of the things that I like that we do is that, we invested about 10 billion, but we created a consortium that basically invests with us. So each euro that we invest basically results into 4 euros. So at this moment there's 120 other funds across Europe that basically co-invest each time that we do a good due diligence and invest in them. And so that's kind of the snowball effect that we need to create at a certain moment. A second solution for us is to have more mafia. And no, not that kind of mafia. About mafia, and I call it startup mafia, and it's a bit related to the once very famous PayPal mafia. So at a certain moment, PayPal, which is still active, was a groundbreaking company where you had a bunch of unbelievable people working together. And the point here is that it became a success. It was a huge acquisition, but all these entrepreneurs, an entrepreneur never stops. They just do something different. And if you look at these very early young entrepreneurs of PayPal, well, 2 of them or 3 of them created YouTube. 1 of them created Yelp. 1 of them is the founder of LinkedIn. 1 of them was Elon Musk, which created Tesla and SpaceX. 1 of them created Slide, 1 of them Kiva, 1 is Peter Thiel, is like one of the main investors and behind Palantir. And so out of this group, you get a network effect. And that's something that is needed because not everybody will keep on being an entrepreneur, but you can also help from policy perspective or in a corporate or have a fund. It just creates more and more. We start to see the same thing in Europe with a bit, I guess about 10, 15 years delay. And Sweden is the first best example. Out of Sweden, you had Nicholas Sandström, that's the guy in the picture who created Skype. Out of Skype, you now have 400 companies. So 400 new companies were created based on the people who once did Skype. And now they're, again, quite lucky because Spotify is also from Sweden. Yeah, they're twice lucky. And you have the same effect now of Spotify people. They're all doing the same thing, and that's going to be needed. Every of the countries are going to need that, and it's not only Sweden or US or France. I always like to take this example of Estonia. Estonia is a country with 1.6 million people, so it's basically Brussels, and they have 14 unicorns. 14 startups are worth more than $1 billion. 14 because they think, and I was there at the conference, it's crazy. Every young person I talked to said, yeah, I'm going to conquer the world. It's also a mindset, it's the ambition that is set. It's the closest, I lived for some time in California, and then when you were in Silicon Valley, you had a bit of the same thing. Well, the closest to Silicon Valley we have at this moment in Europe is Estonia. And then quickly EU, I'm going to jump through it. The AI Act, I mean, that's going to change a lot. But my personal belief is that no region will trust another region with its AI and with its data. So we're going to have LLM and GPTs that are going to be very regional based, because all these data is going to have such an impact on how we live, on our healthcare, on our education, on our finances, that we're not going to trust systems. Nobody's going to cross their data with a Chinese or even a US system anymore. So it's going to be a very localized GPT approach. I think in Europe, what is really great now is that there's 15 AI factories. So that means that there's huge investment in infrastructure, but also huge in the applications on the infrastructure. And so they start to deploy that next year, and that's absolutely what is needed. They now need to specialize a bit, but yeah, it's really absolutely what is needed. And the reason why it's needed is that it's like an open space. If you look at this picture, on the left you have everything, all the huge companies that were created based on cloud computing. And we all know them as Salesforce and Workday and Shopify and all the large ones. And then you have the developer-based large companies, Atlassian and Unity, and you have the data ones and security and infrastructure. If you then now look at the last iteration, which is AI, you see that indeed on infrastructure it's going to be Amazon and NVIDIA, and on data it's going to be Meta and Anthropic. But if you look at applications, there's only one. The entire application layer in AI is open. There's one company that is doing more than $1 billion now, it's ChatGPT. They just announced yesterday that the recurring revenue of ChatGPT, which was launched a poor 2.5 years ago, has now reached 15 billion. It's an explosive kind of growth that we've never seen. We're now applying like software and SaaS metrics to how it can grow, but we don't know yet. My point is that getting into this application layer is something we should all look at. If it's from your existing SME or your startup with whatever ID, there's a huge opportunity for everyone in nearly every domain. And I think I'm a bit proud of the Belgian ones, and especially here in Odoo, because not only is Odoo, and it's fantastic what Odoo has been doing, and I've been following them since they were still called, what was it called again? Tiny ERP, and then it became Odoo. And not only is it creating an entire economy, it's also an example. It's an example for people that it can be done. It can be done from, I think, Mont-Saint-Guibert, or was it again? From a small town, and you can be a global leader. And we have another one, DeliverAct. It's a kind of a delivery intermediary software for restaurants. They're doing as great. And Colibra, it's a Brussels one. I took one in Wallonia, one in Brussels, and one in Flanders. That's a Belgian kind of compromise. Colibra is just as great. And so these are companies that are created by individual entrepreneurs and that have become huge. And that's a great example. And so I'll end with that. First of all, I believe AI changes everything for everyone. I really think that it's worthwhile looking at Europe as a partner. It's the first time ever that it's so ambitious and that it's there, and it will be there for the next couple of years. So I invite everybody to know that and get involved in it. It's now, they're open for business, figure of speech. And thirdly, love Belgium, that's a bit big, but I'm really proud of what companies like Odoo and what the Odoo team are achieving, and I think it helps us all to dream bigger. If you have any questions related to it, it's bart.becks@gmail.com, Becks like the beer. Thank you.
Okay, hello. You can hear me, guys? Yeah, okay, great. So if you have any questions, you can just scan the QR code over there, and I'll read all of them if you have time. For now, there's only one, and the first one is, can Odoo become the next big tech company?
Yes. I think it partly already is one.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I agree.
And what is great on some kind of platforms, why is Odoo so great? It is sometimes you have companies that individually become really big tech companies, and so that means that they're big for themselves. You have also platform companies like Odoo where Odoo becomes great, but also partners that work with them can be great. So it's kind of
The whole community.
It's a whole community, and it becomes kind of a multiplication within companies, and individuals can be a partner, and large companies can be a partner, and I think we're only at the beginning. If you look at the global expansion.
Yeah.
I followed Fabien's journey into India, which is kind of great. Then you see what an individual can mean and bring the team along.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really great next one.
Okay, great. Oh, we have a lot of questions coming in. I'll read the second one. Hi Bart, can we opt out from the EU AI Act and cookies pop-up? I want to be able to use the Meta Ray-Ban display AR glasses and its AI functionality. I'm okay to share my personal data with Meta to get those functionalities, but the EU is making Meta block its AI functionality. Thank you, Byron.
Yeah. Hi Byron. I think it's a good question because I'm a bit in dubio about the EU AI Act. So on the one hand, I think it's a good thing because unsupervised AI will lead to misuse of it. At the other hand, taking it too far will lead to a lack of innovation, and for example now some of the applications or hardware that you will not be able to use, and especially we're now getting into the period of physical AI, where you're going to have an integration of hardware and the AI, and the elements are quite limited. So my personal recommendation is that that this AI Act was written 2-3 years ago. It's now implemented and it's a new era, and that we would be better off now pausing it, adapting it into what is actually there, making sure that some people align with the AI Act, because I see that in many regions it is being considered a fairly good act, but now it needs to pause, adapt to it, see where it not stifles innovation, and then move on.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a lot of questions that are kind of similar, so I'm going to read some of them and you can maybe answer all of them at once if you can. So somebody said, why is Europe going to stop blocking progress? So many AI innovations are blocked by Europe because of the EU. Somebody else says, so it means that Europe will finally stop legislating on things that they don't own and follow their entrepreneurs in their adventures. And somebody else say, how do we fix the capital market, capital structure problem in Europe? So a lot of them related to how Europe interacts with AI.
There's two, one is the regulation and one is the capital. First of all, I think that, and I'm an entrepreneur doing stuff on a European level, and I think that for too long, it's only been politicians that have been doing policy, right? Politicians, they only know what is regulation. This EIC, what I talk about, it's the first time that they ask people from outside, non-politicians, to help in governing it. And I think that's the way to go. Because a lot of the politicians, they never created the company. And so I think that is going to be the only way forward. It is by having people who are entrepreneurs or investors who have been in an operational role, have them influence that and not leave it just to the politicians. So that's one point. It remains a complicated one on regulation, because we should reduce regulation all the way. It's a bit unfortunate that Deutsch became such a negative connotation, because with a great implementation it could have been an example. Now there's a bit of doubt related to it, but yeah, I fully agree, regulation needs to decrease a lot. Capital markets is another one, and I think that unlocking the capital markets can be a bit done by investing EU money, but it can especially be done by having great entrepreneurs, so people come to invest, and by unlocking capital in what we call the so-called wealth, sovereign wealth or pension funds. So if you compare in the US, and if you look at Asia and especially China, but you see that it's completely state-owned, right? It's a state-owned decision-making and capital market. If you look at US, it's nearly completely private, and I think Europe is a bit of the middle. And so what we should unlock much more is, for example, pension funds, which are these huge billion funds that do not invest into technology. In the US, in some areas, they are obligated to invest 2% of their portfolio in starting companies. And starting companies, it's not a week old, but a certain maturity. I think doing the same thing, and the Netherlands is the first country to do the same thing. So Holland just oblige their pension funds to invest 1% of their budget into it. Sweden and Norway are doing the same thing, so I think that will unlock a lot of additional capital for European market.
Great, we only have like 30 seconds left, so I'm going to ask a quick one. Someone asked, let's say I have a good idea for a tech startup, where should I start? In 30 seconds.
Start with finding a customer and selling to them. The moment that you find a customer and sell to them, all the rest of the capital will follow.
Great, thank you very much.